May we be reminded here of our highest aspirations and inspired to bring our gifts of love and service to the altar of humanity. May we know once again that we are not isolated beings, but connected in mystery and miracle to the universe, to this community, and to each other. Thank you for joining us for the online worship for October 4th, 2020.
Welcome, everyone. On behalf of the entire congregation, I welcome you to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Shenandoah Valley. I'm Leslie Blackburn, your worship associate for today's service. We gather together with our doubts as well as our convictions, with our fears and our hopes, with our failures and our aspirations, with our sorrows and our joys. Whether you're joining us today for the first time, or you've been a member or friend for years, we're glad you are here. Whatever faiths you have known, if any, whatever your background, whoever you are, whomever you love, however you arrived here, you are welcome. As Dixie Wiles comes forward, let us all say together from our homes the words for lighting our chalice. In the light of truth and the warmth of love, we gather to seek, to sustain, to share. I invite you to join with me as we say our covenant. Love is the spirit of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament. To dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in freedom, and to help our neighbor, to these ends we covenant one with another.
And as we have done from the beginning of this pandemic every Sunday, I'd ask you now to please join with me in a moment of silence as we hold in our hearts all those in our nation and the world who are struggling and suffering from the COVID-19 pandemic and systemic racial injustice and civic unrest, and all of these challenges that we face in our world today. Please join me. Thank you.
Our reading for today is written by Harry Meserve. From arrogance, pompousness, and from thinking ourselves more important than we are, may some saving sense of humor liberate us. For allowing ourselves to ridicule the faith of others, may we be forgiven. For making war and calling it peace, special privilege and calling it justice, indifference and calling it tolerance, pollution and calling it progress, may we be cured. For telling ourselves and others that evil is inevitable while good is impossible, may we stand corrected. God of our mixed up, tragic, aspiring, doubting, and insurgent lives, help us to be as good as in our hearts we have always wanted to be. Amen.
I wrote in my description for this service, we are living in traumatic times. The health of our nation's citizens and the health of our nation's democracy are being fatally threatened. These are not easy words to write or to hear. Do you think I'm being overly dramatic, overwrought, exaggerating, or perhaps overly sensitive? Perhaps. But I want to say, if you are feeling unusually anxious these days, you are not alone. If you are feeling traumatized, that is as if life will never be the same as it was before this. You are not alone or just imagining it. In the midst of a global coronavirus pandemic, indeed, our lives have been disrupted, and the number of people directly impacted is huge, perhaps even beyond our comprehension. But does that mean it doesn't affect all of us? Some of us are definitely feeling it more than others, or maybe just at different times. Some of us can see the tangible changes in our lives beyond face masks, hand sanitizer, and computer screens. Some of us, though, are not just missing the comfort and familiarity of what was our usual routines of going from place to place and interacting in close proximity to the variety of folks we usually encounter in our daily lives. Lives are being lost. Jobs are being lost. Homes are being lost. And some of us here are gravely concerned that our hard-won and essential practices of democracy, American democracy, are being lost. And it's all happening just beyond our reach. We can try to protect ourselves, and we should, against this COVID-19 virus. We can try to adapt to modified places where we can gather with others, and we should. And we can do our part to protect our precious democracy by being informed and voting as we should. But what about all the stuff that is beyond our reach and at the same time is so threatening? What do we do about all of that? It's true cause for an existential angst. We want to be able to do something constructive, something positive, because we care. We care deeply. And at the same time, we realize that our power to do something constructive, something positive, is so very limited in comparison to the magnitude of threats at hand. I would like to be able to say to you with some confidence that things will be better soon as some others are trying to do. But my friends, it feels more responsible on my part and more realistic in the big picture of things to say to you instead, there is a greater storm on our horizon, and we need to prepare ourselves, our homes, and our communities for larger forces beyond our control that may threaten our sense of safety and security. Many of us have privileges of protection, but we are all at risk in these dangerous times. The dangers are real and not imagined. COVID-19 is a risk to all people. No one is exempt. Some of us are blessed with access to more resources to deal with it than others, that's for sure, but we are all equally at risk. Early on in this pandemic, I mistakenly said in a Sunday sermon that we are all in the same boat when it comes to being at risk for COVID-19. But that was my unconscious privilege talking. My friends, we are not all in the same boat. Some of us have access to resources that so many others simply do not. We are in the same storm, but different boats, if you are lucky enough to have a boat at all. The risk of COVID-19 is not just the virus itself, but the impact it has had on our economy, especially, and will continue to have in these coming months. Just as more and more people have tested positive to the virus with or without symptoms, more and more people's livelihoods are being impacted every single day. We all have to accept that we won't be going back to the business as usual that we knew before anytime soon, and likely never. Life as we have known it has changed, and there is no going back. And when life has changed in this way with our lives and our livelihoods literally at risk, it is traumatic. Trauma takes an emotional toll on our lives, largely because we don't feel like we have the personal resources to deal with it. It can be overwhelming, and we can naturally feel helpless and at times even hopeless. This is the nature of trauma, my friends. While COVID-19 is a new global phenomenon, the loss and grief of trauma have been with us as a human experience from the get-go. If you have not experienced a personal trauma in your life so far, you can be sure to count your blessings, and it's not over yet. The vast majority of us have indeed encountered personal trauma of one kind or another. The second part of my written description for today's service went like this: how do we move through these perilous dangers with care, compassion, and commitment to our future? How do we build a greater capacity for resilience and responsiveness rather than hardening our hearts, shutting down, or just plain giving up? So first, I think I need to say that this is a task that we will all be working on for the coming weeks and months, and hopefully doing it together. When it comes to this, there are actually things we can do. We don't have to feel totally helpless or hopeless. For one, we can keep showing up, as difficult as it can be at times. What do I mean by that? We can keep doing the things we do that are positive each day, even though it is difficult and feels insufficient. We don't have to give in or give up to the dangers of these times. We can and should be taking care of ourselves and each other. The number one way we will get through all of this mess is to band together, if not physically, at least emotionally. We keep showing up to all the places where we are supported and cared for, and we keep showing up to offer all of that to the others in our circle of family, friends, and larger community. We just have to accept that we don't always know what to do or what to say. We don't know the answers or the ways to make it all better, which most parents are wired to try to do. But just because we don't know how to do this is not a good reason for not showing up. We need to be willing to be present with each other and to the wrestlings of our own heart and to a world that needs us in order to get better, to heal from all this mess. The fact is, we need each other more than we know, and every one of us has an essential part to play. To close this installment of an ongoing topic, I wanted to share with you words that I was given permission by the author to share. A woman living in Vancouver, British Columbia, Amber Samaya is a visionary artist, poet, and activist. She writes, "Every day now I wake up and I feel it, grief. It is not a grief conjured up solely from my own personal losses, although those have a part to play. It is a different grief. It is a lingering, low-lying, non-distinct grief. It is a grief that hovers, mixed with concern, with worry, with desire, with longing. A grief for something lost, or dying, or calling out for my attention that feels like it is going to perish because there is no way for me to reach it. It is like a baby constantly crying somewhere in the distance. Yes, like that, 1,000 times over. A grief for things being harmed that I alone have not the strength or power to protect. A grief that reaches out its hands to a burning rainforest, to a trafficked teenage girl, to a victim of crime that was denied justice in an unjustice system, to salmon contending with low water, to a stand of trees cut down for yet another development, to a beach covered in plastic, to a child covered with sores, to a sensitive soul shooting up the overdose of fentanyl, to the last caribou standing in a functionally extinct herd, to First Nation communities surrounded on every side by industry, to the factory worker in China who forgets her own name after a 14-hour shift, to a migrant worker exhausted and unable to find a safe place to live, to a struggling farmer in India who can't afford his debts, to a millionaire buying love over and over again and never receiving it, to a person who hasn't been touched or hugged in months, to the freshly logged cut block in the last remaining old growth. I feel you, but I cannot touch you. I feel you, but I cannot reach you. I feel you because I am you. She continues, here is the challenge of our time, dear beings, to truly open our hearts to the wonders of interbeing, to live a connected, open-eyed, open-hearted, wide-awake life of awareness and responsiveness to what is happening on our beloved planet. This comes with a cost. And that cost is an intensity of grief. The grief of being born to an earth family that is poisoning each other and our one and only home, that is neglecting and ignoring its elders, including indigenous peoples worldwide, and squandering the inheritance of our children, our young ones, and our future ones. She goes on to say, I don't think that the world is full of cold-hearted people. I don't think that that's why we're not seeing a full-scale revolution and revolt against business as usual. I think the world is full of people who only know their heart to be so big, who feel the subconscious fear of the cost of it breaking if they were to let the full reality enter like a mighty rushing wind. I think the world is full of people who need to feel more and more and more. People who need a deeper and wider feeling experience inside of their human experience. People who have learned how to block that from happening and so are in need of a great softening medicine. People exhausted with pain and don't feel they can take just one more drop. Grief, you are a heavyweight champion, the great contender, the water and the stone. And yet I do believe our hearts need to be expanded by this collective grief. And so today I am making a stand for the grievers. I am making a stand for grief itself, that we must feel it, that we must not hide from it or run from it or lose our faith in its ability to connect us most deeply to all life. That we must not allow cynicism to arise in the absence of making space for it, because perhaps cynicism develops when grief is retained in the mind only and is not allowed to reach deep down and expand our hearts. And that this grief, if we let it do its work in us, will have us turn fiercely and lovingly toward all that we love. It will give us the wherewithal to protect it and each other and to stay open, to be giants of feeling. She closes by saying, I think the revolution will come through the catalyzation of grief work. It will arrive quietly and powerfully on a trail of tears. May grief do its work in you as it is doing in me.
Our closing words for today are written by Reinhold Niebuhr. Nothing worth doing is completed in our lifetime. Therefore, we are saved by hope. Nothing true or beautiful or good makes complete sense in any immediate context of history. Therefore, we are saved by faith. Nothing we do, however virtuous, can be accomplished alone. Therefore, we are saved by love. No virtuous act is quite as virtuous from the standpoint of our friend or foe as from our own. Therefore, we are saved by the final form of love, which is forgiveness. As Dixie extinguishes the flame, let us say together from our homes the words for extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of our community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we meet again. The purpose of the church is to encourage all who gather to grow more generous in spirit and in action. We hope you will consider making an offering after today's service through our webpage, uushenandoah.org, which allows us to exercise that generosity of spirit for this self-supporting church and its many ministries, which continue while we're not able to be physically together. And we invite you to join our church community at noon at our virtual post-service gathering for joys and concerns, followed by our coffee hour conversations in smaller breakout groups. The Zoom link is found in your UUCSV email. And thank you for joining us today.
These are difficult times, my friends. Thank you so much for joining us today. Stay safe, stay strong, take good care of yourselves and each other, and we'll see you next time.